All right, we're gonna roll towards you on the number 3. 1, 2, 3.
I'm Dr. Walpert. We're going to be taking care of you today. I know there are a lot of people around you and it's scary, but we work as a big team.
I thought it might have been a little bit heat related, but his tachycardia never came down and stayed sustained.
I suggest we transport him, get some fluids on him hydrated.
What's up, bud?
I'm just dizzy.
Okay.
I don't know why.
All right, you feel like you're going to pass out?
Yeah, I just feel real weak.
Real weak?
Yeah.
Okay, let me get a pulse real quick on you.
If I'm not suspecting trauma, I'm simply going to go to a head tilt chin lift. We're now going to discuss emergency planning in athletics, a critical component. Emergencies do happen in athletics, and we have to be prepared to act, and this happens by planning and rehearsal. Case in point, 2011 SEC Track and Field Championships. First day, 60-year-old track and field coach from Mississippi State has a history of a prior coronary artery bypass, collapses in the infield, sudden cardiac arrest. Quick response by athletic trainers with immediate CPR. He's defibrillated with AD and successfully resuscitated on the field. Transported to the local hospital with emergency cardiac capabilities, where he immediately underwent emergency cardiac catheterization. He had surgery the next day to place an implantable defibrillator and a pacemaker, and subsequently had a redo CABG surgery and had a full recovery. This is the coach at the press conference a few days later following his release from the hospital. This case demonstrates the effectiveness of emergency action plan. Why did this work? Advanced planning. On the first day of the track meet, our track and field staff actually rehearsed this, what would happen if we had an emergency on the field. The day before, the evening before the track meet started, with all the SEC track and field medical staff reviewing the emergency plan, what would happen if we had an emergency on the track or field. We had effective communication. The gates were opened for access for the EMTs. We had rapid response by campus police and EMS. Campus police was the first to respond, secured the scene, helped clear traffic to allow access for the ambulances. Prompt response by EMS. We had appropriate medical equipment there. We had excellent communication with the hospital. Actually, from the scene, a 12-lead ECG was performed in the ambulance, was transmitted by fax to the hospital. When we arrived at the hospital, the cardiologist was there and the cath lab was cleared. Obtained his medical records. During transport, a call was made to Mississippi State medical director. She contacted the cardiologist, and shortly upon arrival, the cardiologist was in communication with the attending physicians at the hospital, and his medical records were received by fax. Great examples of how advanced planning make an emergency preparation work. Now, fortunately for us, most of the injuries we typically see in athletics are minor, but life-threatening injuries are unpredictable and can occur without warning. Because they don't happen with great frequency, unfortunately, many times we may develop a false sense of security. But the reality is emergency can happen anywhere, any place, and any time. Emergencies do not discriminate by sport, by race, or by sex. Athletes are considered to be the healthiest members of society. And when we have a sudden death, it's a catastrophic event with many implications. There's a heightened awareness, and questions arise about the qualifications of the people involved. Was there a plan? Was it followed? What actions were taken? Proper management of emergencies is critical. It should be happened by trained personnel. Note I did not say medical personnel, but trained personnel, because in many situations we can use trained non-medical personnel to assist with the initiation of an emergency action plan. And what kind of preparation should we have? Education and training, maintenance of emergency equipment and supplies, appropriate use of the personnel, and formation and implementation of an emergency action plan. The EAP should be thought as a blueprint for handling an emergency. A sound emergency plan is easily understood. It establishes accountability for the management of emergencies. An important concept, failure to have an emergency action plan can be considered negligence. As professionals, we have a responsibility to take care of our athletes, to provide emergency care. Whether we're an athlete trainer, a coach, a physician, we have a professional responsibility. At the University of Georgia, I have 600 student athletes. And my role is to try to take care of them the same way I expect my son and daughters to be taken care of. We also have a legal duty to develop, implement an emergency action plan. It's important to note that absence of an EAP or having an EAP and failure to implement it effectively is the most common basis for sports litigation. A classic case is Kleineck versus Gettysburg College in 1993. A young lacrosse athlete who died on the field of practice of sudden cardiac arrest. There was no emergency plan available. There was no medical care on the field at that time. There was no communication plan. Taken to court, the judge ruled that the college owed a duty to the athlete's institution to provide prompt and adequate emergency services while engaged in a school-sponsored activity, a landmark case in emergency medicine. The bottom line is every institution that sponsors athletic activities should have a written emergency action plan. It should be developed in coordination with local EMS. The first thing we do with emergency is dial 911 and contact EMS, so it leads to common sense. We should have them involved in the development of our emergency action plan. Emergency action plans should be specific to every athletic venue. We have different facilities for swimming, our tennis, our basketball, our football. Our emergency plan should reflect that. For example, the University of Georgia, I have 4 different emergency action plans for football alone. We have one for football practice on our fields. We have one for football games at Sanford Stadium, which is a different venue. We have one for scrimmages and practices at Sanford Stadium, which is different because on those days we don't have the 95,000 fans in the stands, and we have different EMS responses. And last, we have one for strength conditioning and for our off-season workouts. The EAP should encompass communication, personnel, equipment, and transportation to appropriate emergency facility. And most importantly, we can't just have a plan, we have to practice and rehearse it on a regular basis, at least annually. The EAP should be a written document. As athletic trainers or allied healthcare providers, it should be approved and signed by the medical director, the team physician. Who should we distribute it to? It's important to understand the concept. It's not just the sports medicine staff. It's an institutional responsibility. It should go to physicians, to athletic trainers, to coaches, to strength conditioning staff, to athletic administrators. We actually have an in-service the first of the year at the University of Georgia where we talk about emergency action plan. We invite campus police, public safety, fire, EMS, and have an opportunity to review with these individuals as well. And actually, if we have a new facility, we'll do a walkthrough and take them and orient that facility so it's not the first time coming in cold. The most important part about treating emergency is first recognizing emergency. So we need to make sure we have recognition of emergency procedures. For example, sickle collapse. One of the most common causes of death in athletes right now is sickle cell crisis. Unfortunately, many times this is confused with heat cramping. However, there's many distinctions, and we need to recognize these. Again, the concept of treating emergency is first recognizing emergency actually exists. Communication is critical. It's the key to quick delivery of care. Here's an example of emergency action plan posted by the telephone. We'd like to think that we're calm and cool and collected. We have to have an emergency conversation with EMS. But what if we forget the street number of the building we're in, or the cross street, or a landmark? Here we can have it on the plan, and it's easy to read to the emergency dispatcher. We want to make sure we have access to a phone, fixed or mobile, or other telecommunications device. Do we have 911 capability? We can't assume it's not commonplace to have it in every situation. Do we have a backup communication plan? Making the 911 call, giving the 911 dispatcher the appropriate information. Many times, athletic trainers and other people assume that what we see is what the dispatcher sees as well. But we've got to understand that they're in a room simply listening to the information given over the phone line. The response that they send is dictated on the information we communicate to them. so we want to give them the appropriate information to have the right response. Our name, our address, the telephone number of us, so if we have an emergency disconnect, they can call us back. The number of athletes or patients involved in the emergency. What's their exact condition? Again, the response we receive is dictating the communication. And ambulance has a number of tools involved. My dad was a carpenter and I grew up helping him, and he had a big truck with hundreds of tools inside. We arrived on the job site, he'd say, Ron, get the crowbar, get the sledgehammer, get the sawzall. We picked the tools we needed specifically for that job. And ambulance is the same way. They have many tools on board, and when they come, they pick up the tools they need. So for example, if we make that call and say, we have someone in cardiac arrest, we're administering CPR right now. When they dispatch that ambulance, as they're arriving there, the paramedic is making mental notes of what equipment they need to get off. So when they get off, they have the gurney, oxygen, defibrillator, airway tools, cardiac drugs, so they immediately have those things ready to save that person's life. So it's important we give them the condition of the athlete, any first aid treatment we've initiated. Specific directions, particularly schools, can be very confusing on campuses. If I call 911 and ask for an ambulance to come to my house at 1180 Arizona Bend, a red light's going to come on the computer screen grid and it's going to tell the ambulance exactly where to go. If I call the ambulance here for Stegman Coliseum, it has 60 outside doors on 4 different levels. How do they know where to go? We want to give them specific directions. And then the dispatcher may request other information that we can give them as well. Personnel, what are the roles within the emergency team? First and foremost, immediate care of the athlete. Secondly, retrieving the equipment. That's done by making sure the equipment is always in the same place every time. You can't get more confusing than sending someone for the AD and yesterday was here and today it's here. Emergency equipment needs to be in a designated place and always be there. Activating EMS with 911. Direction of EMS to the scene. Emergency personnel is based upon training. Anyone involved in athletic participation, whether it be an athlete trainer, a coach, a strength and conditioning staff, needs to be familiar with the emergency action plan for the venue they're in, updating CPR, first aid, prevention of disease transmission, and environmental considerations. The EAP should specify the equipment needed. It should be located at the site, quickly accessible. It should be appropriate to the level of training for personnel involved, and it should be in good operating condition and checked on a regular basis. For example, is the oxygen tank full? Are the AD batteries appropriately charged? Are the AD electrodes within date? In an emergency situation, the athlete should always be transported by ambulance. We should refrain from ever transporting an unstable athlete in an inappropriate vehicle. We want to think about our emergency care facilities. Great example going back to the first case with the cardiac arrest at the track and field championships. We actually took that patient to a hospital 1.5 miles further down the road because it was a cardiovascular hospital. We want to make sure that we take them to the facility that can take the best care of them. And sometimes that may involve a longer distance, but picking the appropriate medical facility. Emergency information can be contained on a pocket card. This is an example of a 3x5 laminated card that can easily be carried in the athlete trainer's pocket. On one side, we have a copy of the venue-specific emergency action plan. On the other side, we have pertinent medical conditions. Important to emphasize again, a common mistake that we see many times is the sports medicine staff is familiar with medical conditions, but other people are not. Anybody involved in athletics, whether it's a coach or strength conditioning staff, needs to be familiar with the medical conditions of their athletes. Do they have sickle cell trait? Have they had difficulty with heat in the past? Do they have cardiovascular issues, diabetes, asthma, other medical conditions? Catastrophic incident guidelines. If a catastrophic incident occurs, it could be the sudden death of a student athlete or a disability or a life-altering injury, we need to think about having a catastrophic incident management team and a chain of command. This is an example of a pocket emergency action card which all of our staff carries, athletic administrators, physicians, athletic trainers, and coaches. It's a step-by-step working sheet of what to do in the event of a catastrophic guideline, and the other side has emergency contact numbers. In summary, we can't stress enough the importance of being prepared when an emergency happens. Survival may depend on how well trained and prepared athletic healthcare providers are. We want to invest organizational ownership in emergency action plan. It's not just sports medicine, it's everyone in our institution that's involved in athletics. And most importantly, we have a plan, we have to review it and rehearse it on a regular basis. Thank you.